Hey guys, welcome back to the Laid Back Homestead. I'm Crystal and today we are in the kitchen. I am bringing you two recipes. One of them is new to me. I'm making a focaccia. I've made focaccias in the past, but this particular recipe is new to me. It seems like it may be a little bit easier, which I'm all about the laid back version of things. So I'm excited to try that. And then the other recipe is just a really simple, quick dinner recipe. I've made it 1,000 times. As always, I will link the recipes down below to share. And so, yeah, let's get dinner going. The ingredients for the focaccia are pretty straightforward. You will need all-purpose flour or bread flour. I'm using instant yeast. You need lukewarm water, which lukewarm water I read is anywhere between 90 and 110 degrees. So I may let that cool down just a little bit more, get a little bit closer to 90. And olive oil for the top. I do have some tomatoes sitting up here waiting to get processed. Busy mom life. My little pre-composter over there is ready to go. Let's get started making this. So today's one of those days I really just need to get things done. And because I am baking, I am going to be using the weighted measurements for the flour, which just happens to be 512 grams. Now, the reason why I was drawn to this recipe in particular was because normally when I make a focaccia, it's really big, like a sheet pan size, but this recipe calls for a 9 by 13. The other reason I was drawn to this recipe was because you can make this dough and let it do a slow rise in your refrigerator anywhere from 18 hours to 3 days. So like if you really wanted to pull a focaccia out for a party but didn't want to sit around and wait for it the day of, that would be the way to go. 513, I'll call that good. To my flour, I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of salt, which I forgot to show y'all that y'all needed, so I apologize for that. 2 teaspoons of salt, and then you're going to also need 2 teaspoons of yeast. I'm just going to sprinkle that all around. Try not to get it too much directly onto the salt. I don't know if that makes a difference. I've been told it makes a difference, at least when it comes to the bread machine, but I'm not using a bread machine today, so it may not make a difference at all. And now that I have my flour, salt, and yeast, I'm going to just give that a quick little stir, and to that I'm going to add in my lukewarm water, which now my water has gotten down to 100 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead, pour that in, and it says to mix with a rubber spatula until it forms a sticky dough. So we will see what that looks like. Now that this has incorporated, it should form a sticky dough, which is what I have here. And this is the part where you pour over your olive oil. You want to make sure you have a nice layer on top. We're just going to cover the surface with olive oil. Spread that around. May need to add some more. Just, you want it to have a nice kind of seal on the top. And it's at this point where if you were going to do the overnight version, you would cover it and put it in the refrigerator. I don't know if that's too much oil. It didn't really give a specific amount, but I know focaccia normally does require a lot of oil, so we'll see. I am not doing the overnight version. I am doing the all-in-one-day version. So mine is actually going to sit at room temperature to rise. I'm just going to cover it loosely with some foil. So now I'm going to let this rise room temperature for an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'll come back and see if it has doubled in size. Okay, so it has been about 2 hours and my dough has puffed up quite nicely, and now it's ready to be put into the 9 by 13. Now I am going to grease this. The original recipe says you can do butter to grease it or olive oil, so that's what I'm going with, just some olive oil spray. I did go heavy on my olive oil in here. So now for this part, you just need to put it in your 9x13. Now it does say to deflate the dough. That's what I kind of did there. Just gonna plop this down in here. And now it's gonna begin its last rise. And because I'm doing this at the room temperature and not the overnight in the refrigerator, this should only take about another 30 minutes. There's no need to cover it for this particular rise, so I'm just gonna leave it sit here. And I'm gonna go ahead and get my oven preheated to 425 because my oven does take a little while to get preheated. And then I'm gonna start working on the toppings for the focaccia. Okay, so while my oven is preheating, I'm gonna go ahead and get some herbs. The original recipe that I'll have linked, she uses chopped rosemary, which I do have some here. I got all 3 of these from my garden, which I didn't film because it was raining, but I have some fresh basil here that I just rough chopped. I have some fresh oregano here that I rough chopped and some fresh rosemary. Now, the other thing I'm going to be adding to this recipe is sliced grape tomatoes. So I am using Brad's Atomic grapes. I've had these stored in my refrigerator now for a little while, and I cut them in half. Some of them are a little bit soft. Put those in my pre-composter. I meant to make this recipe a few days ago, so shame on me for being a little late. But all I do to prep these for focaccia, I just slice them in half like this. I started making focaccia with Brad's Atomic grapes, and it's kind of just become a tradition. You can use any tomato, or you can leave tomatoes off. You don't have to do it. It just adds a little something extra, I find, to the bread. And that's it. Now I'm just going to wait for my oven to preheat and my dough to finish rising. It should only take about 30 minutes. And I'll come back and show y'all the next steps. Okay, so this has sat for about 30 minutes. So it's time to add on our toppings and then use our clean fingers to put some dimples in here. The original recipe recommends putting your toppings on and then adding some more olive oil to make sure nothing burns. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. And then doing the dimpling process. I do have a lot of olive oil already in here, so I'm not expecting too many issues. I'm gonna go a little heavier with the rosemary because I love rosemary. And then I'm just gonna add in some cherry tomatoes, cut side up. May not have room for all of them, that's okay. I'm actually thinking about also making at some point a tomato jam. I've also seen recipes for like a bacon jam. Maybe I'll make room for these too. I mean, you really go wrong with focaccia. All right, so now, oh, almost forgot. They recommend using a flaky sea salt. I don't have a flaky sea salt. I just have a coarse sea salt. I don't know if that's the same thing or not, but that's what I'm gonna use. And I'm gonna just sprinkle that lightly. I put a little in my hand just to see what I was dealing with because I bought this for another recipe and I don't use it all the time. And now I've got my olive oil here. I think we'll try to mist it. I'm gonna just kind of add a little bit more on here to the top. I'm just going through, pushing it down, putting those dimples in there. May have been easier to do that prior to the toppings, considering the toppings I'm using, but it's coming together. So there we go. I'm just going to reinforce my tomatoes. Now that I have it looking the way that I want, it's going into the oven, 425 for 25 minutes or until golden brown. So now we're in the oven for 425, 25 minutes. All right, guys, she's beeping. My house smells amazing. I'm ready to take her out and see if she's done. Safety first. Well, she is certainly golden brown, but because I am a little bit of a nerd when it comes to baked goods, I am gonna internal temp just to make sure we are at 190, and we are over 190, so we are definitely cooked through. So now she's just gonna sit on a wire rack to cool for 10 minutes, and then we'll give her a taste test. Alrighty, it has been 10 minutes, and we are gonna give this a taste, see how we like it. Oh, you hear that crunch? I ended up cutting kind of a big piece, but I haven't had anything to eat yet today, so I'm okay with this. So let's give this a taste. Oh, that was so good. First bite I get pure rosemary, which is just one of my favorite herbs. You can see the texture. It's just so nice on the inside. It's got a crispy crust on the outside. Try this with the Brad's Atomic Grape. The Brad's Atomic Grapes are so sweet. This would be so good even with like sun-dried tomatoes on it, because that pop of sweetness is just so good next to that really rich crust. This is definitely a winner. I am really excited about this recipe because I do big spreads for the holidays that I host. I host Halloween, Thanksgiving when I'm in town, as well as New Year's Day lunch. And I do very large charcuterie spreads. This would be a perfect addition, adding my own homemade focaccia to my charcuterie spreads. So I'm super excited about this. And when I'm preparing for big parties like that, the more things I can make in advance always helps me. I mean, I always start preparing for those big spreads and those big parties, days in advance. This is a winner for sure. You can't go wrong with this. So our second dinner is a shrimp and sausage air fryer dinner. I make this all the time, and I really love it because you can use ingredients straight from your garden and just add a protein source. We normally do a Cajun style sausage and shrimp, as well as zucchini and bell peppers. I also like to add on yellow squash as well as red onion whenever I have them available. But really you can add on any vegetables you have growing. So I like to start this by chopping everything up, putting it in a Ziploc bag, and marinating it with spices and olive oil. So this is one of those meals you can prep earlier in the day and just let it sit in your fridge. And that's typically what I do until it's time to cook it in the air fryer. Now you'll see I have 2 Ziploc bags out, and that's because I simply make 2 versions of this dinner. I make one that is mild for my younger boys, and then I make a version of it that is spicier for me, my husband, as well as my oldest son. So once I'm finished chopping up all of the vegetables, I will then move on to the protein and add that in the bag. And on this particular evening, my husband was home, so he decided to chop up the protein. And we do use frozen shrimp for this recipe, so you can see we have those thawing separately in a bowl. And once we're finished with our protein, we just divide it up equally between the bags. And now I'm going to start by pouring some olive oil in each bag, and then I'm going to be adding seasonings. I typically use garlic powder and onion powder as well as Cajun seasoning, and then I also add in some salt as well as some extra cayenne to the grown-up bag. Now take the bags off and give them a good smushing around to make sure everything is well incorporated. Now you can let this marinate in your refrigerator for as long as you want, and then when it's time to cook, I cook mine at 350 for 15 minutes. Now my air fryer does cook hot, so make sure you are checking around the halfway point for doneness. And that's it. A really simple weeknight dinner comes together in minutes. Well guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today in the kitchen. I really appreciate the company. I hope these recipes inspire you to cook what you grow. That's kind of the whole point for me for 2025. That was my promise to myself, was just to utilize as much fresh produce as possible. If you have any recipes you'd like to share with me, please do so. I'm always looking to try new things, to branch out and experience different types of food and cuisines. Until next time, stay blessed.